Welcome to the World Fintech Festival in Sweden. My name is Ulf Skarin. I'm the moderator of this event, which is arranged by Findec. And next to me, I have Anders Norlin from Findec. So what is Findec?
Findec is the Swedish community for fintechs. We have slightly over 150 members currently, all the way from really early stage startups to more fast-growing scale-ups. Quite often they go international. So doing this event is putting Sweden on the map, since we have the Singapore Fintech Festival running with 40 countries across the world. So we want to showcase what's happening in Sweden and put us on the map. Good.
Thank you, Anders, for that.
Thank you.
So this day consists of 5 different sessions. And now it's time for our 4th session, which is headline the Go Global Challenge. So my next panelist from different angles and setups is very knowledgeable about the fintech scene, and they have deep insight from international business. So it's about how to think and build and scale for international expansion. So with this, I say welcome to 4 different persons, all with a truly global mindset. So in the studio, we have Magnus Bergman, and online, we have 3 people. Ornit Shinar, Jonas Karles, and Georg Ludvigsson.
Hey.
Hi there.
Hello.
Great. So let's give a brief presentation of the panel, and let's do it the way that I've done it earlier this day, that you sort of pitch yourself to the audience. So should we start? Maybe we should start in the studio.
Okay.
So Magnus, how do you pitch yourself and your work?
To start with, I'm an entrepreneur. I think that's really important. I have a background, started a couple of businesses with an international mindset. I started a consulting company that became part of Icon Media Lab, and there I started Icon, was part of the founding team of Icon Media Lab Asia, and we had the head office in Singapore, and expanded the business across Asia. So I was chasing consulting companies in Australia and Malaysia and so on. But then, after being a founder, I moved to the business angel side. So selling myself is more like, what can I do for the companies as investor? And as an angel, I have invested into 30 companies. Some of them have become global successes, like Truecaller. It's a really big mobile application, in particularly in some parts of Asia, and Prezi also, more in the industrialized world and in the US. But and in Sweden we have that mindset, and young entrepreneurs are driven by the international. Sweden is never enough, right? But then yes, and then as an investor we have Luminar Ventures, and of course then it's about selling in ourselves, but also our money in the fund. It's a $60 million US fund, and we've invested into 30 companies so far, and 5 of those are fintech companies. So yeah, that's
right. That's a lot on your track record. So
it's been interesting years.
Yeah, we're gonna come back to that.
Yeah.
So Ornit, how do you present or pitch yourself and what you do?
So I run external innovation and venture investing for Citi. I was first recruited in 2013 when fintech wasn't even a real word yet. So I had a front row seat for the development of this entire industry, and it's been quite an exciting ride. At Citi, we created an accelerator for startups, and we today have over 100 graduates that have raised more than $1.3 billion. So we know how to leverage both. We know how to leverage both the network that we have within City to enable the startups to reach the right stakeholders within the organization, as well as using the network of the bank to reach additional potential clients and help the startups succeed best in getting the largest network possible. In parallel to that, we have a venture investing arm, and with that, we've invested in hundreds of companies around the world, 10 of them already in Israel. So we're quite excited about the possibility of working with startups. We invest at all stages and in companies that are, I would say, applicable to banks. So it can be fintech, but it can also be enterprise or cyber or broader applications than just purely fintech. And we use our network the same way we would in the accelerator to help our portfolio companies thrive within the organization.
All right.
And historically, an entrepreneur myself, I love helping the entrepreneurs, rolling up my sleeves and seeing what I can do for them. Very excited to see what we can do in Scandinavia, where I've been working for the last 2 years on meeting companies there. So looking forward to seeing more.
All right, good to hear. Are you based in Israel or in Scandinavia or?
No. I'm based in Israel, but I've been visiting the different Scandinavian countries very regularly over the last 2-3 years. In fact, my last trip before getting COVID grounded was to Scandinavia.
Good to hear. Jonas, what about you?
Yes, I'm running Mina Technologies together with quite a big company now. We have scaled to 75 people, something like that. And basically what we do is that we foresee the subscription economy, and we know it is booming and it will become really, really big. So what we are trying to achieve is effortless banking in that subscription economy, by bringing more power to the modern consumers living in that in those subscriptions, sometimes traps. And we are quite obsessed with this mission. We're doing subscription management tools for banks, and that reduces the bank's back office costs. For example, by having more users, for example, blocking payments or cancel their credit cards online instead of doing it in the back office, which is, of course, quite costful for the bank. And then we also enable new revenue streams by making the bank more of a marketplace, which is kind of a big word, but marketplace as in you can switch your utility in the bank, etc. And then, of course, we are riding on the wave of Georg and Mina and the others of the digital experience, like beyond banking. And there's new customer expectations. You want to have the budgeting tool, which, for example, Mina is providing. And of course, we are doing insights as well when it comes to subscription management, insights and information you need to have about your subscriptions.
All right, thank you for that, Jonas. And now, Georg, we're curious about you, of course. What are you doing?
Yes, hello guys. My name is Georg. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Mina. So building that company has been a big part of my life for 10 years. I'm originally a software engineer, passionate about personal finance. I'm a personal finance nerd. And we at Mina, we're pioneers of personal finance software for banks. I mean, one of our founding beliefs is that, and our key messages to banks is that to stay relevant and close to their customers, digital banking needs to evolve from a place where you just transact and do banking into more of a virtual advisor, some kind of financial coach. And part of that is, so we have a broad set of building blocks to help achieve that, to help transform digital banking into more of an advisory user experience with insights, with advice, with different use cases. We focus on a few key use cases within personal finance, like budgeting and financial planning, but also many others. And we partner with some of the leading institutions in the Nordics and Europe, and also outside to work on this. For example, this week we announced a broad partnership with Swedbank, the largest bank in Sweden, where we are our software is broadly used, and as Mina's software is as well, to bring different use cases into that digital bank. So some modern examples of the use cases we focus on is carbon insights, helping people understand their carbon footprint. So that's part of what the expectations of users is, not just understand and manage the money, but also understand the impact of their spending. And we also help, but we don't only help big banks improve their own channels. We also work with banks that are launching neobanks. So we maybe half of our projects we're launching challenger banks or neobanks with incumbent banks. For example, with UOB in Singapore, we are one of the main technology partners behind the Tomorrow app that they have launched in 5 different markets in Southeast Asia. So we provide, in short, building blocks for banks to improve their existing banks or help them challenge the challengers, where we focus on the use cases that have strong impact. And we're quite global. We're in over 30 countries with our solutions, working with more than 150 banks, although we're primarily in Europe. And I think this space has never been more interesting. I think there's so much dynamism in fintech. There's a lot of investment in fintech technologies that are many that, and most of the headlines goes to use cases and solutions outside of traditional banks. But we firmly believe, and I think Mina probably shares that many of those up and coming use cases, I think subscription management that Mina is doing is a great example, will happen largely inside digital banking. So a lot of these new up and coming success cases of new kind of usage or value added services are happening inside digital banking. We, for example, also work with Nordea in Sweden. We have a cashback rewards service there that and it's the first time Nordea contracted with a third party and have them operate a part of their mobile bank. So Monica handles their cashback rewards section, but it's fully branded Nordea, and the people experience this as the Nordea app, but it's operated and fully by Monica and in contract with Nordea. So that's an example of a bank opening up their mobile bank as a platform for a new use case, where we then share the commercial benefits of. Not in a very different way that Mina is doing with subscription management. So I think it's a very interesting time to do that.
Thank you for that introduction. So let's start with I was thinking about like maybe to start in a more broader sense. If we sort of look at Swedish or Nordic fintech companies, how positioned are they for going international? And I would think maybe we should start with Ornit, because you're not from the Nordic countries originally. How do you view sort of Swedish and Nordic fintech companies when it comes to internationalization?
So I guess my answer would be split into 2 parts. So one part is companies that are undeniably doing it, right? There's Shopify, Skype, Kahoot, Wolt. There's no doubt that they are international first, and they're making it big, and they're teaching everyone else how to do it, Scandinavian or other. But then you have a lot of the other companies that we're seeing, and there's a very different thread. So I would be really curious to hear if those companies started out saying, let's go Scandinavian, let's go Swedish and then Norwegian and then Finnish and then Danish, and then we'll take on the rest of the world, or whether they decided to go global from the get-go. Because a lot of what I'm seeing in the other companies, I see them very focused locally, sometimes even with a problem or a solution that aren't necessarily replicable globally. And I wonder whether that is the path to go, whether they're on track to becoming another Shopify. So I'd say I'm seeing a bit of both.
Yeah.
And I'm very curious to see and hear what the others have to say on that.
Yeah, let's dig into that. Magnus, what do you say?
Yeah, well, as a venture capitalist, we wouldn't invest in anything that's only Swedish or Nordic. It's a far too small market. But sometimes you need to validate your idea, to find the product market fit. It's important before you start to spend a lot of money on digital marketing or scaling international. So I think it's somewhere between the minimum viable product and the product market fit. You can very well be local and see that that you do 10x on what you do, and that's really important. And when you have that confirmation, you should start to scale. And but we would never invest in anything that does not have at least European ambitions. Sweden and the Nordics is far too small for any disruptive digital business, because one part of disruption is that you maybe get less revenue per customer, and that also makes it less viable with such a small market. You really need to go big.
But has that happened over the years? So with your experience, do you see are companies better at doing that, or was it like that?
Yes, I mean, what we have here is an ecosystem that's just behind Silicon Valley in terms of producing unicorns. If you include Finland and Estonia and Denmark, it's actually the Nordic Bay is actually overproducing compared to the Silicon Valley, and that's thanks to the ecosystem. It's thanks to more things like the bank ID. Is super important because it makes it feasible to really innovate, and also the mobile infrastructure is outstanding. If you compare to, you go to London and you try to download something, you can and you go here and you download, and it's a different experience, I promise. So I think that it is a unique ecosystem here.
Yeah. So what do you say, Jonas, when it comes to Swedish fintech and going global?
Yeah, I think it's almost like in New Zealand that the market in itself is too small to launch something big. So everyone who is launching a fintech or a startup in New Zealand or in Sweden then is thinking global from the start. Born global, as we usually say.
Yeah.
So I think that's clear from our side as well. That's from day one we were thinking like that. But then there is this fine-tuning thing. What does that mean? It's probably about think global, act local, as they say, and that is a lot of truth in that. Yeah.
Yeah. And Jörg, what are your opinions?
Yeah, I fully subscribe to that. I think that's one of the blessings in disguise of being from a small home market, that you have to think global from the beginning. And that means you, like for us, that meant not kind of working on things on the product that were very local in nature, like tax systems or pension. You rather focus on things that are very global, like subscription management, or that is very global use case, and build your product in that way. You use English as a corporate language from day one, and so on. So I think that really helps. So we have also challenges of being from a small home base, but this, I think, is one of the blessings.
And how do you, is there any, if we stay sort of focused on fintech, are there any sort of special niches in fintech that we are extremely good at in Sweden and in the Nordic countries? Ornit, again, with your sort of outsider perspective.
Sure. So there's certain areas where I definitely see a strong focus. So everything that has to do with all the APIs and the ability to interconnect more viably and more interestingly is a one. I think I'm waiting to see the bank ID being exported to more countries. I was actually in a conference in the Far East where one of the countries was talking about using it, and I heard about it, and they were trying to create their own, but certainly something I would want to see go global, and there's a lot of thinking around that. There's a lot of consumer-focused application, front-end, whereas in other countries I'd see more back-end or more system-based innovation. Then I'd say that Scandinavia is a lot more front-end and consumer-oriented.
Right. Well, what about you guys? Magnus, what do you say when it comes to niches in fintech?
Well, I agree. I mean, I think front end and building really good products that convert. I think that there is a sort of a tradition, I think, in product product design, something between sort of engineering and the commercial aspects. I think it's pretty strong here. So maybe compared to another company, they might be really engineering focused and build more back-end solutions. So I agree. I think the combination of commercial aspects and the engineering, that's one of the strengths of this ecosystem, I think. I mean, people working at Spotify, they can move to a fintech company and build a super good fintech product because they are really good at user experience. And I think yes, I agree with you on that. And then I'm not sure, I can't really compare. I mean, we have investment into InsurTech, but I'm not really aware of. It's sort of an emerging area, but I mean, we see a lot of activity there in Scandinavia, at least.
All right. What about you other guys? Jörg, for example, do you see any specific niches within fintech?
Yes, I mean, like I mentioned in the beginning, one of the key use cases we are helping banks with is helping people understand the carbon footprint of their consumption. And Sweden is probably the most competitive market in the world for that. There are 5 very credible startups in that space, and there's a lot of environmental awareness across the Nordics. So if you kind of build a solution there in that field, I think that's a very good place to start. That is probably ahead of the curve. So that we see as we'll be announcing soon a partnership with one Swedish bank on that. We think that's a great start and something we can take elsewhere to follow. Another example I'd mention is collaboration between banks. There's this like Swish and Mobile Pay and Whips, where banks have collaborated on infrastructure. I think because of the small size, that is easier to pull off in the Nordics. And for example, with our cashback rewards service, we're trying to also create that collaborated multi-bank setup, which I think the Nordics is a better place to incubate such services in.
Okay, thank you. Jonas, you want to add something to the niches when it comes to fintech?
No, I think I'm good. Let's continue. We have so much to say.
Yeah. And so little time. But I want to pick up on what you said, Jonas. You said and that's also the theme of this panel discussion, the go global. I mean, it's easy to say go global, but how do you actually do it? What's the most important thing when you want to go global? Jonas?
Yeah. How many hours do I have?
No, 1.5 minutes left.
That's okay. I think it's all about the mission. Why are you running? Why are you going global? And having this obsession about this mission is so important, and really acknowledge that as long as people are in an organization, there will be no perfect organization. And that's not in a negative way. I think that's just let's acknowledge that, and then just work with passion before strategy. And this mission statement is more important than having all the processes in place, except for compliance. Compliance is important, but you probably get it. So I think it's all about having a clear vision on where we are going.
Okay, the rest of you guys, if you can pick just one thing when it comes to go global, what should that be? Magnus?
Well, I mean, I agree with that you said, but there are super good opportunities now with App Store and the web. It's super unique where you have distribution channels to all over the world. And I think that's what the new companies are focusing on, both B2B and B2C. And that's really amazing.
So use that structure.
Use those channels and find ways that can take you far. And you don't know which country you will succeed. Like in Truecaller, it happened in India, but it wasn't a plan. But of course, India can also access the App Store, and that's
all right.
And then it all happened there.
Ornit, if you were to pick one thing.
So I would say focus directly on something that is a generically, broadly applicable problem. I think the universal equalizer that is COVID has made it possible to go directly anywhere in the world. So rather than starting with a small place, go right for the jugular, for the big markets, and try and see if you can make it work.
All right, thank you. Jörg, you have the last and final word. One thing.
Yeah, I'll keep it short and sweet. I think I agree with all of this, but I mean, you have to get sales right. So get sales right wherever you are. And that works differently in different regions and countries.
Good. Thank you for that final word, and thank you for your time, panel. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So it's time to put the focus on one of the most successful fintech apps in the world, actually. It's Swedish and is used by 94% of all the Swedes. So maybe you already guessed what I'm talking about. And if you have not, let me present to you Swish. So welcome, Josef Hai, Chief Strategy Officer at Swish.
Thank you so much, Ulf, and thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. I've been on board for a couple of hours now, listening in. Super content so far. I'm Josef Haj. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer with Swish, responsible for strategy and internationalization. I'm extra excited to be on this particular theme. So the Go Global Challenge. I was an early employee with Klarna, working on their expansion and corporate development, later with Benify, an HR tech company, and then later with my own companies before starting here with Swish. So I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to what Swish is for the listeners that don't know, and then tell you a little bit about how we conceptualize and think about internationalization. So first of all, Swish is I would say a Swedish concept to some extent. We are a mobile app. We are a brand which builds on account-to-account payments in real time, where Swedish banks have collectively come together and built the end-to-end experience for their users and their merchants. It's built on top of a couple of other components that are also bank-owned and bank-led, including the local gyro or clearinghouse that has built a real-time engine for us here in Sweden, and the national authentication scheme, Bank ID, which was referred to in the panel before. So all these components together with the banks is basically what has laid the foundation to what Swish is today. We're currently one of the largest account-based services in Europe. So this year we will do somewhere around between 600 and 700 million transactions. So we are second largest in that sense after Ideal in Holland, but we are the largest ones when it comes to account in the mobile. We're bank owned by the 6 largest banks in Sweden, launched back in 2012, and have an additional 6 banks participating in the scheme. We have 3 types of services: simplified P2P, C2B, and B2C, which is sort of payouts or disbursements, which we recently launched. Today we have 7.5 million users, so that's 94% of the Swedish population between 18 and 65. And then between the ages of 65 and 85, 58% of the Swedish population use the app. And out of those 7.5 million users, 6.7 of them are monthly active users, meaning that they did at least one transaction last month. Our users are exceptionally satisfied as well. So 76% of our users are promoters. And this year we will do on average 1.8 million transactions every day. So we started off from the P2P side and have now tilted more towards the C2B side, so merchant-enabled payments. And this year, roughly 40% of our transactions or payments will be initiated through a merchant. Hopefully in Q4 we will reach that magical 50% breaking point. Let's see what happens. We are the most recommended brand in Sweden, and we have built the 3rd highest brand equity out of all Swedish brands after Volvo and IKEA. We have 4 types of products. This is obviously simplified, but one is the app itself that is used by our users. So this is where you can engage with the app to do a P2P transfer or an online payment or buying in a store or whatever. Then we also offer our service to physical stores or physical merchants, and to some extent here we've fully penetrated the micro merchant side. So these are the smallest merchants that are too small to have a terminal and that don't want to accept cash. So basically in Sweden, cash is not existent. So this is where they accept Swish instead. We've penetrated the small, medium side as well quite well. And next year, our challenge is to come into the truly large retailers. We launched our e-commerce service in 2017, and only 3 years after that, we now process more than 8% of all Swedish e-commerce volumes. And then our last but not least product we launched this summer, Swish for Payouts. So this is a product where a merchant or a company can initiate a payout to a user of Swish in real time. A good use case here is, for example, insurance companies that can, from their back end, initiate a Swish payout. So we launched back in 2012 and have come quite far, but that doesn't mean that we're happy with where we are. So we see 3 things on our focus the coming years. So the first one is P2P development. The user is our bread and butter, and this is where we need to constantly develop our relationship and build new products and services for them. The second one is merchant growth. So this is twofolded. One, we need to obviously grow our merchant reach and make sure that we are accepted everywhere for the Swish users. And secondly, it's about building new products and services and features that help the merchant incrementally grow their business. And then third but not least, which is sort of the point of this talk here, is internationalization. And given the sort of hyper domestic nature of Swish, it becomes a relevant question. First of all, why would you think internationally? And second, how do you think internationally? And as I mentioned, Swish is at a glance at least hyper domestic. So we only have Swedish users because you need to have a Swedish bank account and you need to have a Swedish social identity. We're built on a Swedish identification app. We're built on Swedish real-time payments infrastructure, and we are distributed by the Swedish banks. But even being a domestic service, we are in an international context. So our users are global. Our merchants accept customers that may or may not be Swedish. And then around us, things are happening, infrastructures are changing, policies are changing, regulations are changing, and so on. And this is something that we are following quite closely. So just to get some structure in such a short time, we are talking about 2 concepts here. So the first one is, and this has been mentioned in a couple of other talks before, one is interoperability. So as I briefly reflected on before, we are a domestic service, but our users are global. So they travel, they have friends abroad, they want to shop online with merchants from other countries, and they want to use Swish when they travel. So in the age category 18 to 34 in Sweden, 29% of all Swedes have Swish as their preferred payment method over all other. And we obviously want to enable them to use this when they travel. So this comes with a number of complexities. We think, at least, that we won't see a European PayPal or European Alipay. We rather do believe that there are going to be local or regional winners that are all interoperable. So the brands themselves, the services themselves will remain local, but they will have international acceptance. So what we're doing here is 1 year back, roughly, we were part of founding an association called the European Mobile Payment System Association. And I think this comes back to the collaborative approach we've had in Sweden, at least. If we want to do things properly and at scale in the banking sector, which we are part of, we need to do it together and reach ubiquity and full penetration quite fast. So with the European Mobile Payment System Association, we have collected 12 of the largest mobile wallets across Europe. And together, basically, we are trying to build standards and processes and technology to enable cross-border payments between our different systems and schemes. And here we've come quite far, but hopefully we will be able to talk more about it sometime next year. On interoperability, we also see acquirers from abroad wanting to get access to these 7.5 million users. So this is another track that we're following on interoperability, is basically opening up and making sure that our users can use Swish anywhere. The second part of our internationalization concerns expansion. So what happens here is basically, and this has also been mentioned in a number of talks before, infrastructures are changing, not only in Europe, but around the world. So in June this year, there were 42 real-time systems, real-time payment infrastructures in the world. By the end of this year, there will be more than 70. So we see a quite strong force around account-to-account payments, and in particular real-time payments, all being harmonized according to the same ISO 20022 standards, and overall having the prerequisites for being at a distance, at least to some extent, interoperable. And most of these systems are quite local, at least, but they also come with a couple of additions. So a real-time payment structure isn't worth that much unless you can add a merchant or user-facing product on top of it. And this is where Swish comes in. So as we see a lot of central banks around the world developing these type of infrastructures, we also see that they are looking to Swish basically to see how have we built the service and the traction and the overall change in society that we have done here, and basically investigating, is there an opportunity for us to grow the service from Sweden to other geographies in collaboration with the domestic, either central bank or banking community. This has been another key point in a number of these talks. So provided that there is infrastructure available, there's a number of big techs and fintechs coming in and trying to penetrate or change user behavior by using payments as the breach basically into the user. What we have done here in Sweden is basically, instead of every bank developing their own service in Sweden, banks have collectively come together and built Swish as their payment service to the market. When this is happening across Europe and to some extent across the world, we see banks looking to this collaborative model and realizing that it doesn't give me much if I develop my own service. It needs to come into a context where there is a uniform brand and uniform experience, and something that I can give to my users that gives scale basically, and that makes it more efficient. So we have just started working with internationalization since roughly 18 months. But I think we're on the track, at least, to reaching a point where we can come to the conclusion that Swish is a domestic service. It is a Swedish company owned by the banks in Sweden, giving value to Swedish users and merchants, but that is which is possible to use also abroad. So that's pretty much what I had to present to you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joseph, for that presentation. It's amazing to hear that you built that strong brand in that short time. And you talked about that, of course, how come. But when I think about Swish, I think about simplicity. It's so simple to use. Has that been sort of on the sort of the main frame from the beginning, or how did you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were a number of requirements on the service when we launched. One of them is that it should be super simple, should be safe, and it should be based on account-to-account rails. And I think looking just at the payment preference from Swedes, where 29% of the younger population at least prefer Swish over all other payment methods online, is a good tick box for us, where we have managed to build a service that is seamless and easy to use across a number of different channels. So it's not only P2P, it's not only physical stores, it's not only online. You can use the same service basically wherever.
But can you see Swish as an sort of the popularity for Swish? Is that an indicator on how people want to pay in the future? I mean, we don't want to pay with and this is my sort of interpretation, but we don't want to pay with credit cards. We want to pay account to account. Is that like the future of payment?
I believe so. So the one doesn't exclude the other. I think there's always going to be different cases for. In some cases, I would want to use Klarna. I want to use invoice. I want to have a credit product to split my purchases. Sometimes I want to get the goods before I pay for them and so on. But this is where we can come in as well and build products that tap into that basically. But I do think the account-to-account side of things is something that's quite new. In Sweden, we've had it for 8 years. In Iceland, they've had it even longer, actually. But we see, first of all, the European Central Bank is pushing their TIP solution, and they are pushing regulations basically to make account-to-account payments more available to everyone, including open banking and so on. So account-to-account rails reduces cost for merchants, users, and banks, and the whole ecosystem, and then also retains the use of the account itself, which is to some extent a threat to the banks as well. So if I have, for example, a Revolut card, I would have my bank account as the deposit for my salary, and then I would just move that to my Revolut card. Same thing goes for a credit card. I would use my credit card for buying stuff and then have my salary coming into my account. So the point of the account would just be to deposit money, which isn't, I think, what the financial sector wants. They want the account to be something that's active and that is part of everyday life.
Right. So it's in the bank's interest to keep the money on the account, so to speak.
Yeah, basically, and fostering account-to-account payments, I think, is definitely one way to do that.
Joseph, you talk a lot about going global with Swish, going outside of Sweden, and could you tell us something about what kind of challenges do you face, and is it possible to do that today, or is it going to take a couple of years, or what does the map look like?
Yeah, so when it comes to interoperability, meaning the compatibility between the Swish service and other types of mobile wallets, Findec or whatever around Europe, that's something we hope to bring to the market soon. When it comes to the expansion side, there's a number of things that need to come into place. So there needs to be a real-time infrastructure. There needs to be an authentication method. There needs to be a history of collaboration between banks. There needs to be the demographical side needs to be that there is 4G, there is a younger population that is tech savvy and so on. That doesn't apply to all markets, for sure, but it does apply to some. And for the ones that do, especially for the ones that have recently developed a real-time payment system, this is where, we have some dialogues ongoing on how can Swish, help the banking community in that country build their own products to help them move into the mobile payment world.
Okay, Joseph. I'm sorry, but our time is up, so we have to keep moving. But thanks a lot for your insights in Swish. Thank you.
Thank you so much.